Hey guys, this is Nate with BleepinJeep. Today we're going to do a tube fender install on my brother's TJ. Before we get started on this project, make sure you like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. As you can see, we already have one of these bad boys installed already. It's a very simple process, but you want to make sure, since you're cutting up a bunch of steel and stuff, that you're taking your time and making everything correct. So what happened was we ran out of time on the first one. He doesn't know it yet, but I'm going to install the second one without him. So when he comes over next weekend, it's just going to be done for him. And I decided to make a video so you guys can see exactly how this process is done. This fender is from a company called Barricade Off-Road, I believe. It's more on like the budget-friendly side. You know, there's definitely some really expensive tube fenders out there. I want to say my brother picked these up for like 300 some odd bucks, maybe 400 bucks. And it's pretty simple to see what you need to take off once you start just looking at the fender out of the box. You've got 3 bolts that go into the grill. You've got these 4 bolts that go into the back of the inner fender liner, and then you have these 4 bolts that go right into the tub. So if you notice, there's some holes along here. These are holes that we're going to need to drill out and then put some 1/4-inch hardware that bolts down onto the existing fender. This is basically just like any other project. You kind of look at what you're going to be doing overall and you plan out what needs to stay and what needs to go. So we're going to unbolt the stuff that we need to. If you look close, there's 4 bolts that go right here. There's 4 bolts that go on the back here, and we're actually going to cut that open to have easy access. And then there's 3 bolts that go into the grill. I also disconnected these lights. We're going to have to cut this loom and wire in an LED because there's no spot on the new fenders for these bad boys. So don't need to remove this because it's just getting cut off, and you just kind of decide what is staying and what is going. Now, we are going to have to remove these bad boys, and they're going to be really easy. I can almost remove it by hand. So I'm going to pop this off. I'm going to remove all the necessary bolts, and then we can start masking it off so we can cut. Now that I have a bunch of this masked off, I want to explain why I did this pattern. The overall shape and everything, it doesn't matter. This is going to get something bolted right over the top of it, so it's not like you have to have both sides be identical or anything like that. What I did this for is that I like to keep, especially with an angle grinder and a cutoff wheel, which is what I'm going to use for this, I like to keep as straight a line going as possible because it's so much safer with an angle grinder when you can cut a nice straight line. So basically, the holes for the fender that we're bolting on top are going to stop like somewhere right here, and this sill is going to be, you know, retained throughout. So in the back here, I basically just left just enough meat to kind of go underneath the new fender, and yeah, we're going to cut it almost all the way to, well, we're going to end up cutting it all the way to the tub, with that, hopefully without nicking the tub. So we're going to cut this nice straight line here, and cut this nice straight line here, and then I'm going to cut a straight line all the way across the front to make the front drop. And then I'm going to cut around here. I'm retaining these holes here. These are important to me because once I get the new fender bolted on top, we're going to have to drill a hole in order to locate our hood pin for this hood latch. So it's going to be a lot easier if this is already in the same existing place, which was already lined up with the upper portion. And then it's going to make it to where I can just drill it from underneath in the same hole, and hopefully everything goes smooth. I want to talk about why I'm using an angle grinder. I use Sawzalls a ton at work. I'm definitely a master of the Sawzall, but a Sawzall is a lot harder to keep from digging down. With this, I can go down as shallow as I want, and I'll show you exactly why that's important. On both fenders, you're going to see these various harnesses. On this side, it's the body harness that is connected to your headlights and your like wiper, squirter, and all that kind of stuff. On the other side, it's actually super important. You're going to see connections like this and looms like this that are containing everything to make the vehicle run and drive. So both sides are very important, and you don't want to take a Sawzall or some sort of blade, a body saw even, and be cutting through this, and then you start to nick some of these important components. But because I was able to go so shallow, I knew this was here the whole time, but I knew I wasn't going to hit it because I cut super shallow. And you do need to cut a ton of this stuff away in order to fit the new fender. So on the other side, we had a lot of fitment issues with the battery tray. This isn't a battery tray, but it's something kind of like a similar shape. I'll be interested to see if I need to trim this, because on the other side I had to trim a whole bunch of it away because there's a tube that goes like right up through here, and it presses right into that. So I'm going to grab the fender and see how our first fitment goes. So it's exactly like I thought. It's going to be really hard for you to see, but inside of there, the tube part of this fender is going right into what resembles a battery tray. So I'm going to have to cut the corner off of that bad boy in order to get this to set flush. The fender's on. It's looking good. The hardware on the front went on no problem. The hardware in the very back went on no problem. It is tight in there, I'm warning you. On the other side, I had to remove the battery. On this side, I was able to just barely fish like a super short stubby ratchet in there and get those on. Also on the other side, we had hardware issues where we couldn't get the bolts to fit, the factory bolts to fit through, because once you add this extra 3/16 worth of space, and then, you know, things are a little wavy and whatnot, it makes it really hard to get them threaded in there. So I put one that I had laying around in here for him just so it's together, and then he's going to have to get 3 a little bit longer, well actually 4, he's probably going to replace that guy too, so 4 a little bit longer bolts in order to fit that spot. Now we're on to bigger and better things. We have a couple holes to drill. Couple 5 on top and 1 down here on bottom. The hood is closed, at least as closed as I can get it. I don't know how to operate these stupid anti-theft hood latches, but I think it looks a lot better. If you didn't notice, there's a little dust on his hood. That's what happens when you bring your Jeep over to Nate's shop. But I'm very pleased with how much better this looks. I know Matt's going to be super pleased. He already had some like tube rear fender flares, and now these fronts match, and it's just a way better looking Jeep at the end of the day. That's the end of the video, guys. Short and sweet, to the point. If you're new to working on your rig, if you've done like a little bit of suspension work, you can change the oil, you know, you're somewhat handy with a wrench. This might be a good like next project for you. You know, this isn't something that I think is worth paying somebody to do. If you have the tools to do it, you know, maybe this is time to buy your first angle grinder with a cutoff wheel and, you know, be able to have a good starting project to learn how to use that tool. I really think that this is a good one to start with. Again, there's a lot of forgiveness with this. What doesn't forgive is cut wires. So make sure, no matter where you're cutting and any project you do, always check behind your fenders, always check, you know, anywhere you're cutting, make sure there's not a brake line behind it, there's not wiring behind it. It is bad news, and then it's gonna probably steer you away from working on your own Jeep. So make sure you take the time to check. Anyway, if you liked what you saw, make sure you hit the thumbs up button. Subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. If you can, please support us on Patreon, and we'll see you next time.